Crimson Tide fans, before we get today's show started, be sure to hit that big red button and stay in the know on the Alabama Crimson Tide all season long. It's football season, and it's in full swing right now as Alabama just got done playing Florida. We'll recap it in just a second, but if you want to stay in the know about the Crimson Tide all season long, the Alabama Football Report is your one-stop shop for everything Crimson Tide football. Hit that big red button, and you'll probably stay in the know a little bit more than your friends on the Crimson Tide all season long. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome into the Alabama Football Report. I am your host, RC Maxfield, and Week 3 has come and gone for your Crimson Tide, and I'm going to be honest about it. I almost had a damn heart attack watching this one as the Crimson Tide went down to Gainesville and narrowly left Florida with a victory, winning 31-29 over the 11th-ranked Gators, and I'll be honest about it. It was not pretty at all leaving Gainesville. Probably more questions than answers when it comes down to it. I thought that there were some positives, including Bryce Young, some very big negatives, which include the defensive line and offensive line. But overall, a win is a win. You have to like that you left with one, but there are more questions going into next week's game against Southern Miss that you need to correct than you answered down in Gainesville against the number 11 Gators. Again, it's one of those situations where when Nick Saban is, not happy, and he's not happy a lot of times, right? Just because he wants to be a perfectionist. But what it comes down to is there was some very fine tuning that needs to be done going into this Southern Miss game next week as they leave Gainesville with far more questions than answers in this one. But hey, what you think? Your one-word reaction to Alabama's 31-29 win against the number 11 Florida Gators. For me, man, it's just one of those things where you got to be thankful you left with the win. It wasn't pretty at all, but you did leave with the win. But as I mentioned in the previous segment, a lot more questions than answers in this one. We'll talk about some of those key players here in a minute. But first, I want to talk to you about today's sponsor of the video, BetUS. It's your one-stop shop for everything gambling, and we know you love to gamble. Why don't you get some free money doing it? Go to chatsports.com/TideBet. Use the promo code TIDE125, and they will give you a 125% deposit bonus. Let me tell you right now, nobody else on the internet is doing this. Don't even go look. Right, this is the best deposit bonus on the internet. Let's say you put $100 down. You're going to play with it all season long anyway. They'll match it and then some and give you $125 to play with on the site for your grand total to be $225. Nobody else is doing this on the internet. Go to chatsports.com/TideBet and use the promo code TIDE125 to get your 125% deposit bonus. Bryce Young. Damn. That was a hell of a performance by him, especially with the way the offensive line seemed to struggle very often in this one. 22 of 35 for 240 yards for the first-year starter of the Crimson Tide. 3 TDs, no interceptions, threw a bad couple of balls. But after leaving this game, I'm not going to lie to you guys, I think Young is the Heisman favorite right now. And really, you go down to a raucous environment like that, down in the swamp, and you show poise. Yes, you didn't leave there with the blowout that you wanted, but you win the game, and really it's no fault of Bryce Young. That game was so close. The run defense was abysmal in this one, and really, outside of a Drew Sanders stop at the line, we could still be playing right now at the time of this recording when it comes down to it. But Bryce Young, I thought, was absolutely phenomenal and deserves to be the favorite for the Heisman right now. Obviously, we were very early on in the 2021 campaign, but damn it, he had an elite SEC road opener for the Crimson Tide quarterback. I am loving what I'm seeing for Bryce Young. Just got to get that offensive line to perform better week in and week out. Brian Robinson, RB1, he's the clear-cut guy. I was speculative early on in the season. Didn't know if McClellan would come in. Maybe Sanders as well. Maybe Williams would steal a few carries here and there. It's done. He is the clear-cut RB1. I get it. Y'all are calling me out in the comments for earlier saying that maybe there's some, RB, talk here going around that McClellan could come in and steal his job. I'm sorry. I was wrong. He's clear-cut number 1 RB for Alabama, and today proved that going into this one, 15 carries to the nearest running back's 9. He absolutely looked electric. I know it says 14 on there. He had 15 touches, on this one. You got to give him more touches. Simple and plain, Brian Robinson Jr. needs more touches. He is the best running back on this this team. You need to run the football more. Now, the offensive line has dampened that a little bit in terms of how you do run the football. Typically, you want to run it between the tackles. Maybe you need to run a little bit more RPO and create space for Bryce Young or Brian Robinson Jr. But overall, I am thoroughly impressed from the Tuscaloosa native in the backfield for the Crimson Tide. Be the coach, though. Brian Robinson Jr. Should he get more touches? Type Y for yes, type N for no. You know where I'm standing on this. I say spam that Y button. Now, if he's not getting 20 to 25 touches a game, I think something is going wrong for Alabama. He needs to be put with the ball in his hands more often. It allows Alabama to create on the outside for the wide receivers and really just elevate this offense. Let me know down in the comments, though. Should Robinson Jr. get more touches? Type Y for yes, type N for no. You know what I'm putting. I'm spamming that yes, as I mentioned. And if you haven't already, listen, we know you love Nick Saban. We know you love the Crimson Tide. Why are you not subscribed yet? I didn't even mean to rhyme there, but I did. Subscribe to the Alabama Football Report and stay in the know all season long on your Alabama Crimson Tide. As we're getting into the thick of it right now, as this was the SEC opener against the top 11 team in the Florida Gators. A lot of quality matchups coming along down the way. Not so much next week in Southern Miss, but hey, who's on the schedule? You got to beat them. Be sure to hit that big red button and subscribe and stay in the know on the Alabama Crimson Tide all season long. Jalen Armour-Davis. Hell of a pick, first and foremost, and I love the pressure that they got on Emory Jones to create this pick, but he's turning into a lockdown corner. I know he gave up that critical out route to Florida on a 30-yard gain there in the third quarter to really put the pressure on the Tide defense, but overall, I really love what I'm seeing from him in the sense that he has the intangibles and the measurables, more importantly. The measurables, he fits that quote-unquote CB1 corner profile you want. He's over 6 foot. He's lengthy. He does a lot of things well on the outside. Now, does he need to clean up some things? Absolutely, but who doesn't in college football? I just love his profile and the way that he attacks the game head on and is really good in coverage, even with that pass breakup that he had and the interception. I know a lot of people will remember that 30-yard catch that he gave up, but overall, I thought he had a really good day on the outside for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Speaking of a great day on the defensive side of the football, Will Anderson Jr., man, my goodness, look at you. Who would have thought? Not me. I didn't think he was going to play this week. I'll be upfront and honest with you. I know that he practiced early on in the week a little bit, but that knee injury looked super scary against Mercer, and he came out and made an immediate impact, and I think he's the most critical guy on this defense moving forward for the Alabama Crimson Tide. He can get to the passer. He can disrupt the run game. He can drop back into coverage. Nobody else is doing that on this roster right now at the level he is. It's great to see Anderson Jr. make an impact early off of this injury that he had. And the real thing is, when he's making this impact, it's at every level of the defense. As I mentioned, he's dropping back into coverage. He's getting to the passer. He's disrupting the run game between the tackles and on the outside. I love what he's doing and really making an impact everywhere on the defense. And he's doing this with the knee where, yeah, he's playing. He was getting a little help off the field, it looked like, from a coach. Maybe that was from just sheer exhaustion. But it did look like he was the most key player on this Alabama roster moving forward, at least on the defensive side, because what he brings, nobody else does on the Alabama defense. Now, let's recap it one more time. 31-29 for the Crimson Tide down in Gainesville. Bryce Young is the story on the offensive side, going 22 of 35 for 240 and 3. You had Brian Robinson Jr. carrying 15 times for 78 yards and 2 TDs, one of them through the air off a 7-yard TD catch. And then Jamison Williams leading the way in receptions with 61 yards. You move to 3-0, and now you head back home to Tuscaloosa to face off against Southern Miss, who will be playing tonight. Their record is 1-1. We're recording this on Saturday right after the game to get it right to you as quick as possible to hear the recap. They will either be 1-2 or 2-1 after they play Troy tonight, but they will enter Tuscaloosa heavy underdogs, as everyone expects, and the Alabama Crimson Tide should move to 4-0. We'll have videos throughout the week updating injuries as well as previewing this matchup against Southern Miss for the Crimson Tide coming back to Tuscaloosa. But before we get out of here, make your pick. Who you got in Week 4? Type SM for Southern Miss or type Bama for Alabama. I know I'm going to see everybody saying Bama down in the comments. Why don't you give me an early score prediction down there as well? And if you haven't already, hit that big red button and stay in the know on Alabama football all season long right here on the Alabama Football Report.